With me in studio now to go deeper into that joint investigation is Canada's Federal Privacy Commissioner Danielle Therrien and British Columbia's Information and Privacy Commissioner Michael McEvoy. Thanks to both of you for joining me today.
We're glad to be here.
Mr. Therrien, I want to begin with you. Your report goes through a number of actions by Facebook that you consider to be quite alarming. Was there one instance, was there one policy in looking at the Cambridge Analytica scandal that perhaps stood out to you as being just a bit more egregious above the rest in your view?
Well, at the core of it, Facebook, we have concluded, does not obtain the meaningful consent of its users before it discloses information to third-party applications. That's one issue. I think what is particularly troubling, more generally, is the company's lack of accountability or responsibility in dealing with information more generally. Consent is part of it. The bigger issue is that we saw that they do not seriously take their responsibilities under privacy laws.
Mr. McEvoy, Facebook put out a statement today saying that they have cooperated with the investigation, that they were disappointed that you consider these issues unresolved. So there seems to be a bit of a disconnect with what you're saying and what the company's saying. What is the reason for that, and what do you see as the issue with Facebook and its responsibility?
Well, one would have to ask the company themselves the reason for the response that they've provided. Clearly, though, it is not an acceptable response. It should not be an acceptable response for any Canadians. There were all Canadian citizens, but the 660,000 that were affected by this breach, which is quite significant. What I think it calls into question is the kind of teeth that we have as regulators to properly enforce the kind of findings that have been made, either through greater order-making power, or the ability to significantly fine companies when they violate the law.
And Mr. Therrien, just to build on that, you've also announced that you now want to take this issue to the federal court to try and force Facebook into changing its privacy practices. What's your rationale for that, and are you hopeful that moving this into the legal system will perhaps get the result that you could not get so far with your own powers that you currently have?
So it is true that we engage with Facebook for a number of months in trying to resolve things, and we were unable to reach a resolution. I think at the basis of it was a disagreement as to whether Facebook was violating the law or not. They think that they were not. So that's why the talks ended without a resolution. That leaves us with then as an option that we plan to exercise to go to the federal court so that the court can agree with us. We hope that privacy laws were violated, and the court can order Facebook to amend its policy so that it is compliant. We think that, and it is the situation in many countries across the world, that regulators are able to issue binding orders on companies, technological companies. In Canada, that is sadly not the case, so that leaves us with the obligation, I would say, to go to court to seek that order.
Facebook's attitude, by the way, is not particularly unique to Canada. I think the commissioner in the United Kingdom found the same thing when she fined the company, which she was able to fine them under her legislation. Facebook, though saying that there was a breach of trust with Cambridge Analytica scandal, nonetheless is appealing the fine in the UK. So it's not particularly unique for Canadian regulators.
And so why do you think then that we've got the situation now where Canada seems to be lagging behind the United States and the European Union in terms of regulation? We know from reports that Facebook is bracing itself for a fine in the US of up to $5 billion. We know there are investigations in Europe happening right now where the social media regulation has been made a bit stricter. Mr. McEvoy, what do you see as kind of the reason why? Is it simply apathy among politicians, or is it just a lack of public awareness or public outcry from the people who are using the platform?
I think there is a growing public concern and a growing sentiment on the part of the Canadian public. I feel it when I speak, as I do quite often. people are increasingly concerned, and I think want legislators to move in this area, to put us on a level playing field with, for example, the counterparts in Europe, who have a much higher level of protection than we do here. And so that's something I think that members of the public should continue to be vigilant in pursuing with their elected representatives.
And Mr. Therrien, this certainly isn't the first time in the past couple of years that you've raised your desire for stronger privacy laws and for the federal government to act. You've said they've been too slow to act. Are you optimistic that what you've put in this report today is going to change that conversation among those with the power to make those decisions?
I think the Facebook Cambridge Analytica matter raised the level of awareness about privacy issues, which I think should lead to more action. It is true that I've called for amendments to laws for years now, and the government has been slow to act. We're starting to see signs that it acknowledges that it needs to act. Unfortunately, there's not enough time between now and the end of the parliamentary session, I think, for legislation to be adopted. But my hope certainly is that early in the new parliament that this will be given priority.
So given that we're just a few months away from the election campaign, as you said, we've heard the federal government roll out its plan to combat election interference, disinformation in social media spheres. Having gone through this investigation, having looked at it closely, what's now your biggest concern about the social media aspect of the federal campaign that we're on the verge of seeing?
Well, I think what we found is that the terms and conditions of Facebook are actually an empty shell when it comes to privacy protection. That means that Canadians are facing a significant level of risk at a number of levels to their privacy, to their rights generally, including the holding of fair and rigorous elections. We have seen in Cambridge Analytica that the data of individuals was used to micro-target electors in the United States, and there is no reason that this will not happen in Canada. I'm not saying it will happen, but it can happen in Canada. So the protections that we have are deficient. I acknowledge that the government asked Facebook and other companies to improve protections, and that is a beginning. But I fear that there are limits to this voluntary compliance and that laws need to be improved again.
Mr. McEvoy, you're in British Columbia, but perhaps you can comment as well generally on what you see as your biggest concern in Canada in an election year when it comes to Facebook, user privacy, disinformation.
Well, I mean, one of the things that happened with Cambridge Analytica, and again, as Commissioner Therrien points out, could well happen here, is that people's profiles on Facebook were used to psychologically profile people, and then in turn used to micro-target them. We don't want that washing up on our shores in Canada. It's one of the reasons, obviously, we're doing this. The other thing is that the nature of campaigning is changing drastically, so that the micro-targeting that happens on Facebook does not happen in the public square anymore. So oftentimes you don't see what's happening in the campaign front. It's all done in the privacy on someone's computer screen. And that's something, there has to be some sort of transparency brought to that process, which in British Columbia is one of the reasons I'm working together with the Chief Elections Officer, because some of these issues are overlapping between data protection and electoral fairness.
Well, Mr. Therrien, let's finish on this then. We know there are millions and millions of Facebook users in Canada, and if you're someone using the platform every day to post a photo, to post a story, to find out what's in the news, what should those people and what should those users see as the most alarming finding from their investigation? And should they have any confidence at all that Facebook is going to be acting in their best interests going forward?
I think they should be concerned, but at the same time, I think individuals will want to communicate, and in 2019, communication is in part through digital services and social media. So it's now a part of life. What I would encourage them to do is to be very careful in what they post online, and I would also encourage them to take their concerns that we hear. My colleague has commented that we hear more and more concerns. Take these concerns to elected officials and make known your desire to participate in a modern society, including social media, but in a safe way.
All right, well, we'll end the conversation for there, but it's a story that certainly won't stop this year. Daniel Therrien and Michael McEvoy, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.